So we're going back on stage again. We're going to be live in the Cork Opera House on March 30th for a very special event, which is going to form part of the Cork Podcast Festival. Our show is called Look Who's Talking. It's going to be all about those criminals. How do we get them into studio? How do we get up close and personal with them? And what have they got to say when the cameras are off? So Cork Opera House, tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie, 30th of March. See you there. We've been talking about drug debt intimidation and some of the hell that people are living in, really. You know, we have been doing a couple of podcasts around it, and people are always looking for answers. What to do? How do you handle it?
So there was a case earlier this year. Dominic Dines is his name. He was a real IRA member, and he actually got jailed for 6.5 years. And it's a classic kind of dilemma that the family are put in. So he calls into the family home of a son who's basically become involved in the drugs trade, and he's developed this debt according to Dominic Dines and his associate. And he calls into the father, and the father has already given him, I think, 10,000. And he says to the father, "You owe 100,000," and the father says, "Sure, I don't have that money because they're ordinary people." And he says, "Well, it's time to sell your house." And that is the point at which, you know, we start getting these calls, because it's ordinary families, working people, probably in their 50s or 60s, that are being put in this situation, that they're really being told, you have to give up absolutely everything.
Yeah, to pay off the trouble that a younger relative or a child has got them.
Yes, and unfortunately it's very prevalent. It has been for a considerable number of years, where, you know, somebody's child growing up, they get involved in buying small quantities of whatever drug, cannabis, ecstasy, cocaine, or whatever it is. Then they overload with the drug, overload with debt. And the debt sometimes is quite small. It could be a couple of €100. And then they're given maybe a bit of credit, where they can get more drugs on tick. So then they're actually in the clutches of the drug dealer then, because they start, you know, dominating their life, and they're asked maybe to hold a gun. They're asked to hold a quantity of drugs in a bag, a hold-all bag usually. And then they start moving small quantities, but sometimes they're unlucky. The guards do a raid. They make a substantial seizure. Then that debt is still in existence. The drug dealer then comes looking for it. It usually begins off with threats to the person who has incurred the debt. And if that's not working, well, then it'll start with a phone call to mum or dad. And I've, you know, unfortunately met with a lot of families who have gone through this trauma. And you can see the actual fear in the eyes of the person when you meet them. Nowhere else to go. When they do come to the guards, that's the last resort.
So they've already probably at that point tried to negotiate, have they? Or tried to maybe get a bit of...
Maybe they've paid some of it?
What they've done is they've done their best to get their child out of the proverbial mess that they're in. To be fair, most people are not skilled at dealing with drug dealers.
No, well, why would they be?
Why would they be is right, and they shouldn't need to be. But they then, if they open what I would always call the money tap, and they start giving them a few quid here, a few quid there. The collectors then probably put a tariff themselves on it, so the 500 becomes 5,000, and then it multiplies with the compound interest that they all apply. And then it ends up with them eventually calling to their door, and they usually go for the vulnerable person in the house. No disrespect, the target mom, say, listen, when dad is away at work, you're going to have to pay for your son's debts. And then there's a panic. The threat will be, we'll burn your house. We'll burn your nice car there. So, and to be fair, a lot of the times people don't have money. They don't have a nice car.
No.
They're living in a sense of poverty themselves. But then they'll also throw in a comment, well, I know where your daughter works. You've seen her walking home. She's going out with such a body. She's in a relationship. You have a child. You have maybe a grandson, grandchild. And, they the threat could be to throw acid in their face. I had a case years ago where this guy, he was going out with a beautician, and she worked around Stephen's Green, that area. And their plot was, when she was coming home from work one Saturday evening, they were going to throw acid in her face and completely disfigure her. Another one was the dealers were going to go up and were going to dig up the father of the young fella who had incurred the death. Were actually going to expose the body out of the grave, as this is what can happen to you. So, you know, it's an
art. Would they have been capable of going, you know, through with those?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, two really disgusting, horrendous things to do to another. You know, obviously digging up a grave is going to affect the family left behind, but to disfigure a young girl with acid.
They certainly had the wherewithal, unless we intervened. And in the digging up of the grave, we intervened. They were actually on their way up to a grave in Bornabrina, and they were going to expose the body, and we arrested them on the way up, and they were dealt with eventually. And that put an end to that. But the plot and plan, the watch for the weaknesses in the family, who's the weak person? It could be maybe somebody is involved in banking. You know, they'll target them and say, listen here, your son owes us 20 grand. You better accommodate us with whatever way of laundering money. That's the way they work. They're always looking for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is, you know, but people don't realise this is probably one of the biggest businesses in Ireland.
The collecting of the debts, like...
Well, drug business then, and the collecting of the debt is just another arm of their business.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And, you know, they have their accountants. So somebody owes a debt, you have to account for it. And it's the, you know, the absolute fear they instill within a community. And people sometimes do have the wherewithal to pay, you know, but most times not. And the families that I would have dealt with, it's the first big step is for them to come into you.
Yeah, because I mean,
major.
There's different categories, but a lot of people are living, like if you know, if they have a son or whatever has become involved in drugs, like they're living in the community where these other people are also living. I mean, that must make it
makes
really
it even more complex,
really different.
But I suppose it's important to point out that, given the levels of recreational drug use that there are now in the country, nobody is protected, whether you're living within a community where there's drug dealing activity or outside it, if you're seen as more privileged. There is such an amount of, you know, recreational cocaine use, etc., that anybody could find themselves falling into debt.
Absolutely. Look, we in Ireland, young and not so young, like it's a cocaine overdose at the moment for our population. You only have to look at the amount of people who are attending rehab. It is extremely available. It hasn't gone up in price over the years. I mean, you know, the price of, you know, household goods have gone up in a huge amount, whereas drugs has maintained a steady price. So basically, it has gone through all the different so-called classes in Ireland. So it could be the billionaire's son, or it could be the person who, you know, the mom and dad who don't have a job. It's affecting all of society, and hugely affecting sport, GAA in particular. I've seen it myself with players who are involved in consuming cocaine. They still have an ability to go out and perform on a Sunday afternoon, let it be with a hurling club, let it be with the football club. And then Sunday night we're back, we're snorting cocaine in the clubhouse or wherever other venue they decide to use it. And then they end up getting themselves in trouble. They end up selling drugs themselves, crashing cars, getting involved with the guards. And then all of a sudden that has a massive impact on the family unit. And then the whole family unit starts to break down because people, you know, maybe a sister decides, I can't listen to that, I have to get out of the house, and everybody starts moving. And it's the breakdown of the fabric of the family unit that is huge as a result of the actions of that one person who decides that in order, and I've spoken to people, you know, sports people, and they say, well, look, if I drink alcohol, I'll end up with a beer belly. If I take coke, I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm able to function. I'm still able to go to work on a Monday morning. I'm making performance at a higher level as I possibly should do, but I will be able to get have a snifter at lunchtime, and then still be reasonably presentable.
Yeah.
Whereas if they're drinking alcohol, they're coming in with a sore head and they look a little bit dishevelled. But the GAA, my whole thought process of any sporting organisation, if they introduced testing of players next weekend, there are a lot of players who wouldn't be able to perform the following weekend. There'd be a percentage, 2 or 3 of the players on certain teams would not be able to play because they would end up with bans.
And say, Christy, it starts, this sort of intimidation, as you said, it can, you obviously worked in Drogheda in the midst of that feud, that was probably notorious for the amount of sort of intimidation over relatively small amounts. I mean, owing a few £100 can see your house targeted, can't it, just to even recover that amount of money?
Absolutely. I went to Drogheda in 2017, and like any place that I would go as a newly appointed officer, you have to get a handle on what's going on. And one of the ways to do is have a look at the amount of assaults you have in your street.
Right.
What sort of small-time drug dealing is going on? What is your small Section 3 possession type of stats are? Look, they don't always tell the truth.
No.
But they give you a flavour of what's going on. Yeah, they give you a good indicator. In Drogheda, in Dundalk, and Dundalk was having a difficult time as well, Ardee, places like that. And they're no different than any other. They're only reflective of all towns in Ireland.
Yeah.
Move over to Navan.
Yeah.
Move over to Ashbourne. Move over to Ratoath. Move over to Westport, places that have a population. You have these problems. But in Drogheda, the flint ignited, the spark was ignited by the shooting of Owen Maguire. And that probably just took the whole cover off the town as regards what was going on in the underbelly. And then in very short period of time, we had 34 houses burnt.
Yeah.
Now, 34 houses is some amount of houses to be just literally attacked. And that's the way they went at it.
And what happened to those? So were a lot of those council houses, or were some of them private?
A mix of both.
Yeah. What happens to the council house, for example?
Well, to be fair to Louth County Council, they were very strong in that they would endeavour to rehouse somebody as quickly as they could, but it wasn't always possible. Then they'd have to maybe put people up in hotels. It's a very difficult situation because the next property those people get could be subject to the same attack. Some people literally just got lock, stock and barrel and moved abroad.
Yeah.
They just abandoned ship and said, right, we're going to get our family and going to move. And that is
maybe an easier thing to do if you're in a council property. If you have all your life's work in your own private home, it's up to you then to repair and...
To be fair, I mean, no matter who you are, to uproot your family because they're going to local schools, your own employment, and then your friends left and right, and whoever you have.
It's not all financial.
It is a huge, thing for a family to say, listen here, things are so bad, we're going.
Yeah.
And they did that. Some families did that. But just going back to Drogheda, a lot of it would have been over small amounts of money.
So you're talking hundreds?
Hundreds, yeah, which then multiplies into thousands. And that's it.
So what happens, just say your son is, say £500 debt, say a teenage son for cannabis or whatever. What would be the step, and he can't pay that? Say, is that normally comes from drugs being seized, presumably by Gardaí? That's a lot of it where that debt would develop, would it?
It comes from drugs being seized, but maybe their addiction.
Yes.
They're taking more drugs, consuming more drugs than they're actually selling.
And then they probably, because it's all on ticks, they don't really know probably what they're building up for a while, and you easily get to say 400, 300 or something. So
what happens then? They call and demand the money off the son?
Well, what they do is they bring the person in themselves to interview them, and that interview is quite robust. They get a beating.
Yeah.
They may get a broken finger. They may get a scar.
Yeah.
Whatever physical torture is meted out to them to impress upon them to pay the debt.
Yeah.
Then sometimes they'll negotiate a deal where, okay, I can't pay, but I'll mind a bag for you, or I'll mind guns for you.
Yeah.
Or I'll bring it, they'll end up in a gopher.
Yeah.
They'll transport whatever, or they'll bring whoever from A to B. Yeah. Or actually maybe start importing drugs for them on their person.
Yeah.
So there are certain ways they'll try to inveigle them to pay. If that person is not in a position to do so, then they will start coming down to the house.
Yeah.
And that's like a bear appearing at their door.
Yeah.
Screaming and roaring. We're going to inflict pain on you no matter what. most families don't have the wherewithal to pay.
So at that point, most families presumably don't go straight to the guards. Do they at that time?
No, they don't.
What would typically happen with you?
I said what happens is the majority, mum and dad, decide to suck it up and say, right, how can we get a few quid maybe off the credit union?
Yeah.
Maybe a bank loan, sell some property, a car, whatever they might have.
Yeah.
Jewellery, plenty of mothers have sold their jewellery, pawned their jewellery to help pay it off. But it doesn't go away. That is the problem.
Yeah.
There'll be family conferences held, they invariably won't have the physical strength themselves to take these people on.
Yeah.
They don't have friends who, are strong-willed or whatever. So then they end up in that mire of panic. What do we do? How are we going to get out of this? And, the whole family unit starts to implode.
Yeah.
Some family members want them kicked out.
Yeah.
Kick them out, kick her out, get rid of her.
Yeah.
That's the problem gone. But unfortunately, it's not, because the debt is then transposed onto the family.
Yeah.
As unbelievable it might seem to ordinary people, they might say, how can that actually happen? Well, that's life.
Yeah.
They go after they go after the family for them to pay. And, sometimes they can, invariably they don't. And, I sat down with one woman one time, her son had owned drugs, a small amount, and they were attacking her house. And she attempted to commit suicide.
Right.
And that's where she was driven.
Yeah.
Now we were able to work with her and pull them out of the mire that they were in, but it does take an enormous amount of resources to do it. But it is possible.
Yeah.
That there is a light at the end of the tunnel in a number of the cases if you come and speak in confidence. But you have to have a very strong-willed guard, detective, whatever rank of a person they're dealing with. And somebody who's committed, somebody who understands the drug problem, understands what these people can do if you don't do something for this person.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you have to do. And you have to develop a very strong plan. What I would have done when the person actually sat down with you and told you truthfully, because unfortunately, sometimes the son or daughter are not telling mum and dad the truth.
Of course, yeah.
They're
That's
lying.
what I've noticed as well when
They're
I'm
lying.
talking to people. You kind of go, this isn't making sense. Do you think they're lying to you? And of course they are.
Yeah,
because
they're lying, yeah.
they don't want to tell the full truth.
They don't. That's unfortunately it. But when they are actually very truthful with you and they're able to give you a full picture, and like when people do that, you're not looking to prosecute them for whatever silly stuff they got involved in selling drugs. You're not going to do that. What you are going to do is come up with a plan, and the plan starts with who's targeting you.
Yeah.
And sometimes the guards actually don't know these people.
Right.
Because they're brought down from the border.
Yeah.
They're brought from abroad.
Yeah.
We would have had UK criminals coming in here, threatening people coming out from Northern Ireland.
Specialist debt collectors.
Oh,
is
yeah.
it?
Yeah. Thugs.
And did you see that during the Drogheda feud or in
yeah.
general? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Quite sophisticated, it feels.
Well, it is, yes, because we wouldn't have those resources to hand. But they paid him whatever X amount and say, listen, you come down here, I need that money. Or they actually sell the debt to the other person, say, I'm owed 50,000 there, give me 20,000, you can have the debt. And they come and say, listen, you have to pay me now. And that's it.
And it's ever more terrifying, every layer of this.
It's horrific because, the initial meeting you have with the family, they're afraid of the guards. Like, I can see it in their eyes.
Yeah.
They don't trust you. Absolutely don't trust you because, I'm sure they're saying in their mind, well, where have you been for the last 2 years when I've been terrified and my house has been burnt out? A lot of the incidents that actually take place, the guards never know about.
Right.
They're never told.
Yeah.
So we would know, like in Drogheda, there was this huge amount of attacks on houses, attacks on cars. But I would say, and it's only a guesstimate that I would say we only knew about 25% of what actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been very truthful. The rest you never hear about until they have nowhere else to go. So they're sitting in front of you, terrified, and you can feel the fear.
Yeah.
It exudes out of them. And, you really have huge sympathy for their plight, but you need them to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
What has happened here? There's no criticism of your son, your daughter, or whoever, what's going on. This is life. These things happen. And then you plot and plan. You find out who the person is doing the intimidating, car registrations, phone numbers, as much intel as you can possibly get on this person. And then I would concentrate all of my resources on him or her.
Yeah.
You take them out of it.
Yeah.
That's it. Legally, through the judicial system.
And what do you do when there is somebody coming in and out there, that makes things really much more complex with the border as well and the proximity of the border?
Yeah, the border is a huge issue because, look, there are little or no controls.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, you pop across, you're in the UK one moment, you're back in Southern Ireland another time. So it does offer a lot of protections to criminals. And even now, the one of the main shipment routes for drugs into the Republic is through the north. And that's it. You come in through different airports, you come in through the ports, and it comes down that way because we have a massive border crossing there and very difficult to police. So it's the same as people coming in to commit serious crime, like intimidating people. If you have the information, like if somebody tells me through another police force or through intelligence that there are criminals coming from the north tomorrow night and they're going to target a house in Drogheda or Dundalk, that is gold dust.
Yeah.
I can use that really, really well. I set up a surveillance operation. I make sure that the family are not going to be harmed.
Yeah.
And I will go out of my way we will contain these crew. They'll normally come with the petrol. They might have a pipe bomb.
Would you stop them over the border? I've seen quite a lot of sometimes I think when the prison bans come down, you see the cops on the side of the road just on the border to take the prisoner if somebody's been extradited. But like I'd be up and down to the north quite a lot, and I often see guards waiting this side of the border, either for a car coming or whatever. So you'd set up a...
No, well, my whole thing was I would let them get as close to the target as they possibly could, because if I stop them on the border, do I know that they have the gun in the car? Maybe, maybe not.
They could be picking it up down here.
They could be picking it up down here. They could have another car in convoy with them. So let's say they were going to hit a house in, say, Drogheda, wherever the location is. I would have... you'd have all of your resources, your emergency response, your surveillance, your armed response, and you will let them get to a certain point where you're going to ensure that nobody's going to get injured, the public in particular. The last thing you want or need is a shootout, and then you have all the other agencies of the state come and investigating you for failure to protect the public. So you're never going to do that. So what you're going to do is let them get as close to the target in the van, whatever they're in, and then you hit them. And invariably you'll catch them with maybe sledgehammers, baseball bats. If you're lucky, it's a gun, petrol bombs or whatever, balaclavas, all that sort of paraphernalia. And then you have them on very serious charges.
Yeah.
And to be fair, then they're facing into maybe a 6 or 7 year jail term. And that breaks the cycle. It smashes it.
And see, this is the thing, because people have phoned me up and they say, well, even if they get prosecuted or whatever, this debt is always going to follow my family forevermore. But that isn't always the case, is it? Like,
no, it's not.
So, they feel, oh, well, even if I put somebody behind bars, I'm still going to have somebody else calling in, and it's just going to go on and on.
No, it doesn't, because what I've seen is you take that crew out.
Yeah.
They fragment fairly quickly.
Yeah.
They're not as solid.
There's not strong bonds holding them together. It's money. It's the payday.
No, it's all about the cash.
Yeah.
So cash is king with them, and whoever has the kilo of whatever particular drug is king at that time.
Yeah.
So you, as a guard organisation or as a police organisation, whatever police organisation you're dealing with, there is only one way in the 40 years I was in the guards to deal with people coming at you with forces, to bring a greater force to beat them.
Yeah.
That's it. So you take them down, and that's it. And it doesn't all have to be about physical violence. It can be, and I've seen the biggest of the drug dealers, when you put the hand on the shoulder, they collapse.
Yeah.
They actually collapse. And then they want to tell you about what other people are doing.
Right.
So they become very compliant.
So it's not hopeless for families in this situation, is it?
No. And I've no doubt there'll be a lot of families listening to your broadcast. So what I would say to any family, you're sitting at home now, wherever you are, you're in the depths of despair. I've no doubt you are. Your only hope is you should make contact either with a confidant, let it be whatever person that you can talk to. Sit down, tell them your story, but then it starts to alleviate the pressure. get in contact with somebody that you can have confidence within on Garda Síochána in the guards. There are drug liaison inspectors within the organisation, and come and tell your story. And it could be just, maybe you just want to tell your story. But, other times then interventions can be put in, such as targeting the criminals. And then some people do have the wherewithal, do have the strength to say, listen, I've had enough of this. I'm going to make a statement.
Yeah.
Because, the only way to push them back is for the people to take the power themselves and say, listen, we've had enough of this crowd in our community.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put up with you anymore. And then a prosecution will take place. Now, that is becoming more prevalent, with the case you spoke about, somebody getting 6 years in jail for intimidating a family. That is the only way to put these people out of action. And 6 years is lenient enough now.
Yeah.
For all the damage they're doing.
But it has become an increasing focus for the Gardaí, isn't it? Like, they have their drug-related intimidation reporting program. Yeah. Like, that's all been put in place, and we're seeing more and more arrests and operations directly targeting it.
It's fine, Niall, putting in all your programs and having your fancy websites. This is what we do on paper. That's only on paper.
Yeah.
Do what you say you're going to do.
Right.
Do it for the families.
Yes.
Get out and meet them. Go out and canvass and find out what's going on within the communities. And then, it depends on the person you're dealing with. And I've seen it myself since I've left on Garda Síochána. I've had cause to make contact with some people who are supposed to be in these positions, and you say, listen, I have a person here, they have a difficulty. I don't get a great reception.
No.
Now, other times I've rang certain people and I said, listen, this person's in difficulty. Yeah. And I got the Rolls Royce of a service where all the resources of the state were put in place to put an end to this.
Exactly.
So there should be, a common service for everybody, that even when that inspector is away on holidays for 3 weeks in the summer, that somebody is there to fill in.
This is what I got from somebody who told me. They said the guard was great. They sat down. He was really, really brilliant. And then he went on holidays and something else happened. There was another firebomb attack and they phoned up and they couldn't get anybody. And
that's not good enough.
It's not. And those sort of stories have to be told as well, because, where the system doesn't work and where the Gardaí aren't coming to help, because this is really like what they are in existence for, to protect the community and to protect people from this sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
And where that isn't working or where they're not getting the service, those stories have to be told too. Because
I mean, it's the absolute terror for these people, because it's totally out of their experience. These are just ordinary people that are... And
it's slightly similar in media trying to tell the stories, because people are afraid, obviously, in the same ways they're afraid to go to the guards. And, we had done quite a lot of shout outs for people to send us anonymously their stories, for what value that was. We could retell it ourselves, but people are afraid.
Yeah.
They are afraid, but there's an obligation on the guards to provide a service to protect people, and that includes protecting them against drug dealers. And what I would always say to any guard that I served with, and even now, you put yourself in your house and you've two very, very serious people outside wearing balaclavas with baseball bats and the petrol bomb ready to be lit. How would you feel? Would you feel comfortable? Would you feel happy? No. You'd be at your wits' ends. The first port of call from most people, if they have some rational thinking, would be to the guards. And then if they go to the guard and the guard, oh, well, what can I do? That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Sorry, you put a plan in place to take these out of it. Like what we were faced with in Drogheda probably was unprecedented in the history of the state, because of the level of violence that went on. And it did take a certain period of time to get the response the way it should have been, because I needed the ERU, I needed, it's well documented what we needed. But eventually when we did get it, we got a good handle on it and we knocked them all. It was like a little bit of a domino effect. You start knocking them and it does take a lot. So it goes back to your, first of all, is your Minister of Justice. We have a new Minister of Justice there now. And what I would say, look, he's a very experienced person, both legally and politically and all that sort of stuff. So I think he will have a strong handle on it. And that's what's needed now, is a very strong handle on the breakdown within the communities. And there's no point coming out saying, oh, it's all fine. Well, it's not fine. Go out there on the street, start talking to people, go into the housing estates, talk to people. Well, how are you today? What's happened here? And then with all the drug intimidation, and I'd say only about 10% of it is ever reported. Very little.
And the kind of the young lads, and they mainly are guys, who are doing the sort of intimidation sometimes within the communities. I'm thinking of Drogheda. There was an awful lot of grooming went on really there by the drug gangs, bringing these kids in.
We actually got a thing like this, exactly, where a woman wrote in about her brother.
Right.
And the brother owed the debt, and what they forced to do was get her other younger brothers to work to pay off the other brother's debt.
Like, intimidating other people.
Well, general work in the drugs gang.
And the general work in the drugs gang can be lobbing a petrol bomb into somebody's front room, can't it? I mean, that is part of it. And it's particularly, they use the young teenagers for those kind of things. Okay, there's people brought in over the border and more serious people brought in, through our airports and stuff. But they do also use those young lads on the bikes, on the scooters.
It's £100, or maybe the price of a decent pair of runners, Canada Goose jacket or whatever it is, a new phone, and they'll provide them with that, and then their status goes up within the community. Look at me, I'm man about town. They may not have the flash cars, but they have maybe a couple of €100 per week to bring them out of the sub-life that they were in. And then they start doing little bits and bobs for the gang, and next thing, all of a sudden, they're completely engrossed in it all because they've a better lifestyle than they had.
And very difficult then to put them on the trajectory of earning a certain amount of quid legitimately a week, because they get used to that kind of money. They have a complete lack of understanding of the earning of money.
And they get used to violence. They get used to this circle of violence where it's normal to go up and give somebody a punch in the nose, or maybe threaten them with a knife and inflict whatever injury. The petrol bomb, like, we would have had people as young as 14 with petrol bombs. They're getting paid to store the petrol bombs. They're getting paid to transport them around whatever area they're required on, and they're getting 50, 100 quid for it. Like 50 or 100 quid to a person who has no money is a lot of money.
A lot of money. Do you want to tell that story about?
Well, here's one that we got written in, because this is the other thing. It's some of the people that get involved in the drugs trade are obviously hard and dangerous people. But this is another story of the types of people that end up in these deaths. This guy wrote in, I have a brother who has ADHD and autism and is very easily led. Approximately 5 years ago, he met somebody and developed a mild to moderate drug habit. Things escalated and he was starting then to sell drugs, not to go into it. He would fast forward a couple of years and he owes €80. He's paying off that debt when he's caught with police.
€80?
He owns just €80, and then he continues to deal drugs to pay off that €80, and he ends up getting caught with 2,500 by the police. So that now is added to his debt. And he goes on and on. I won't get into some of the specifics of it, but they're saying the family are getting constant calls to pay off this debt. They're getting threatened. We are all working people. The debt keeps escalating, and we have a reasonably comfortable life, but we just don't have the money to be paying off drugs debts. And that, he's obviously another type of person that gets sucked into that world that don't have the capacity to deal with it, if anybody does.
And he's a vulnerable person.
Yeah.
And there are, people growing up trying to find their way in life. No more than, Keane Mulready Woods was trying to find his way in life. And if he had the wherewithal to break the cycle, I don't know, he might have been a different person, but he didn't get that opportunity. But they are the type of people that the drug dealers spot very quickly. They look at, people who are involved in drugs at a high level. If they were involved in any other business, they probably would be quite successful because they're quite adept at their business. So then when it goes down the lower levels, they're the people who spot the people who are vulnerable, people that they can bring in to prop up their organizations, because they are losing them, let it be through death or going to prison or whatever. So they constantly need that supply of young people who are willing to do their biting.
Yeah.
And that could be to intimidate you, throw a petrol bomb at your car, or whatever act they're asked to do. So they're always on the spot for people that they can bring in. And then, the younger the better for them, because they get more years out of them. Because, and it's well known with the drug dealers that if a very young person who's only 14 is caught with drugs, they're going to get the benefit of the JLO system for a number of years.
Yeah.
And they won't be prosecuted for a number of years. And they're going to be of great use to them until eventually they're caught and they end up maybe serving some breed of a sentence. So that's what the drug dealers are on the spot for all the time. Somebody who's vulnerable, somebody that they can intimidate and use. And that's all they're doing, is they're using them.
Yeah, because they need human labour, like, isn't it?
Yeah,
like, in a way.
Very labour intensive.
Yeah, it's a labour intensive business, so they need a lot of people and they don't want to be touching it themselves. There's another one here, just a similar one, but it's about a kind of she describes her relative as a socially awkward, anxious teenager who lived on his nerves due to drug issues and debt and problems. We have been threatened with being shot. Houses have been damaged. A car going to be driven through the house. People arriving at the door in gangs looking for money, giving us a certain amount of time to get the money. I remember paying a debt to a woman who came in a little Yaris and telling us the debt wasn't paid until she got back to where she came from, and we would get a call from the boss man. And then she describes her relative eventually having to get out of the country. She said, we have paid thousands to drug dealers. We've even paid debts that weren't his because our home became known as a house that paid. That's what they were saying. Yeah. And the other one, another email, I got a very detailed email about this thing called cuckooing, where they were describing a relative who got in a drugs debt, and they basically took over his home.
Yeah, and that was crack dealing or whatever.
100%. That was how he was to pay his debt.
Yeah.
His house just became...
They take over your business or your house or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it is like it's a life-changing experience for these families that end up in this way.
Huge. And yet again, then they're just watching for somebody, whatever age, and they have their apartment or, whatever accommodation, and they will force them, okay, well, you have to let other people live with you, take it over, and then they're in charge of their life for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nightmare, but I mean, I suppose, to conclude, your advice is always to seek help, to share the burden, to work either anonymously or give a statement if you feel strong enough to do that in relation to this intimidation. But there is and should be help there from the Gardaí, and, if you're not getting it, you got to keep pushing to another level of the force.
Yeah, look, to be fair, there are an enormous amount of brilliant police people out there who will help. And what I would say is go to somebody, tell them your story. Because if you don't, it's only going to impact on yourself. You're going to get anxiety will take over your life and you won't be able to get out of it. So go to somebody who has experience of dealing with these type of people. You understand the way the game works.
Yeah.
Maybe game is a bad word to use, but unfortunately it is a game to a drug dealer, So they understand how the business works. And sometimes and I've seen it myself many times, the person will come in and they'll sit with you. There's a silence for a period of time. And then there's a lot of crying. There's a lot of emotion. There's a breakdown with the person, for 20 minutes, half an hour, a cup of tea, then sometimes can calm everybody's nerves. And then when they start imparting the information about how it all has gone about, they'll start off invariably about their child being born and how good they were up to 3 or 4, how brilliant they were at football, camogie, hurling, soccer, rugby, whatever sport you play, cricket. And then they start telling you about their going to school, and then all of a sudden then they started to change at a particular time. They started becoming involved with these undesirables, for want of another better word, and then how they were caught. So then when they get that off their mind, then what I would have always done was say, okay, this is what I can do for you. And, you can offer a certain level of protection. Sometimes it would be a dry pass, but unfortunately other times I would have to put guards very close by, armed guards, and sometimes surveillance, in order to take the drug dealers out of it. But as long as they are able to come and explain the story, seems to be a huge unburdening of themselves. And then you get to know them very well. There are only decent people. These are people trying to do their best. And even with people, I've had criminals come to me who, they're real life criminals, but they have sons and daughters who have done the same.
Yeah.
And you help them as well. There is help out there. It's not always about making a statement. It's not always about saying, Mr. X is intimidating me, I will go to court. A lot of people won't do that. But it is about coming and saying and asking,
trying to create a plan into the future, because you do.
Yeah.
And funny you mentioned anxiety and stress and all that. You talked earlier about somebody believing that they'll come back no matter what.
Yeah.
That there is no end to this. That is all stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
I think you get this sort of, like, fear is debilitating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's very difficult to listen when you're afraid or when you're stressed or anxious.
Tears you apart.
It's very difficult. It really is a sort of a secret killer nearly in its own way, or a silent or invisible type of thing. But that, even just downgrading that stress by sharing the issue, by speaking to somebody who knows what you're talking about, just brings a little bit of control back.
It does, but there, to be fair, there are organisations out there like the Family Addiction Support Network. They're based up in Dundalk, and they cover the Loud and they cover Cavan Monaghan. I have had interactions with them over the years in relation to families who are suffering greatly, and sometimes families contact them, and they do show them a path. They do show them a path. And it's about how to deal with it within your own family unit, where everybody's running around, nobody knows what to do. So there are these organisations out there who really can help.
Yeah, because it's never hopeless, I suppose. That would be the other side of it. Where, and of course, the stress comes because people just don't know that world.
Of course.
And how would they? Like, there's no reason to know.
They're so fearful. And
amazingly, I actually did talk to a criminal there, and he told me, "Oh yeah, I owed 3 million to that guy at one stage. This is a few years ago."
How did you get out of that?
He said, "Oh, it just went away because basically the other guy died." And so, and that's not to say that, but what I mean is,
they're like the developers. The more money you owe, actually, the less chance there is of anyone harming you. It's the small guys.
It's true, but it is true for families as well, that things do change in that world, and that debt doesn't, it's not like it's lodged in a bank.
Yeah, somebody could go to jail. They could run out of luck themselves.
It does happen a lot of times where, somebody will come to you and say, listen, Mr. X is targeting us. And we would have an operation on them already. And I would know 3 or 4 weeks' time we're going to have him anyway. And that's going to go away.
Yeah.
So that's happening all the time.
Yeah. So there is hope. There's ways to go. And
there is.
And people, like the idea of somebody in their 60s selling their family home to give money to somebody. I mean, it's just not right, is it?
No, it's not right. And I mean, as a society, you do have to stand shoulder to shoulder with those people, and everybody has to
say this isn't tolerable,
Yeah, well, people power works.
It does for sure. And thanks so much for coming in, because I'm sure that even there's just a calm sort of a rationale from you, and having experienced it and been so long in the guards yourself, and you've seen it all.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The good. To be fair, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But to be fair, the good eventually wins out. It does take a lot of time, and that's why it is so important. The people who have the power to do it, from the government down to the Minister of Justice, down to the Commissioner, down to the people on the ground, do your job.
Yeah. The programs are only as good as the implementation of them. So
exactly.
You have to implement it. You can have a great program, but if people can't get through to somebody on the phone, it's not going to be good.
No, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
No, not good enough.
Okay, Christy Mangan, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Christy. Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.